affectionately calling it when nuclear goes global. Just a quick bit of housekeeping. OCNI through these sessions looks to foster and encourage diverse perspectives, opportunities, and challenges in an equal and equitable manner. So if you do have questions, please put them in the chat box. We will do our best to answer those questions as best we can. And let's get rocking on this. So today we're looking at employee mobility and cultural awareness, both for those coming to Canada and staff going to work abroad. Quickly, I'd like to introduce this truly international panel with representation from Canada, the US, England, with roots in Germany, France, and the UK. So first up, we have Clarice. I'm going to mess up your last name. I'm sorry, so I'm just going to go with Clarice is the Vice President of Recruitment for Thomas Thor Canada. We have Nicole Hughes, the Account Director for Thomas Thor. Ben Overton is a Veteran Director Training Services in the commercial nuclear sector. And we have Nigel Board, the Executive Consultant for CNL. So without further ado, Clarice, over to you.
Thank you very much. So Clarice Lièvre. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Navnet wanted me to speak a bit of French, so here we are, but I'm going to carry on in English. I hope you will appreciate that. So first of all, I wanted to thank the OCNI for inviting us today. And it may sound a bit cheesy right now because it feels like I'm talking to myself when I think a lot of people are attending today. But I really wanted to thank the Canadian nuclear industry to be so welcoming because when I moved 2 years ago, I never felt like an outsider when I started working with nuclear organizations. And I've met incredible people. Some of them have become my friends. Some of them may be among the attendees today. And yeah, it may be, the wave from the US with this Thanksgiving coming here. But I really wanted to say thank you to all the people who gave me a chance and also to my team. Let's move on, please, to the next slide. So I guess you want to know what you're going to learn today. So the topics we are going to discuss, and obviously we'll have Nigel, Ben, and Nicole to bring a lot of knowledge and experience. So hiring internationally, when do you consider to hire internationals? I'm going to bring, some knowledge I've built in Canada, obviously. What should be the areas of focus when it comes to compliance and making the people feel more welcome when they start working with you? How to integrate and to create an inclusive work environment to those people who are going to start working in a Canadian environment. And eventually maybe opening up on some questions. We may not have the answers, but how would the pandemic change and reshape our working environments? At some point, we have this example of Nigel, who is based in the UK and is still working with a Canadian organization. So next slide, please. So first of all, I'm going to state the obvious, but I prefer to say it. Hiring internationally is tough and it's a long process. So obviously, when you get the chance, of course, when you're looking for a skill set which exists in your country, you look for local and nuclear specific. Then if I would say that the expertise doesn't have to be nuclear specific, then you still look for local and you have like a wide country with a lot of different provinces to get, for instance, people who are working in project controls, PMO, cybersecurity, in the construction field. So it doesn't have to be all the time nuclear specific. Then when you have exhausted your local pool, obviously you can reach out to international and nuclear if you need the nuclear expertise. And I really would like to emphasize that in Canada, I realized 2 years ago that moving from one province to another feels exactly like an international relocation. Because if you don't change the language, you will change certainly the culture, the tax implications. You will still have for people to relocate their belongings, a change for the family. So it's really a shock. I would say not as shocking as an international relocation, but it's still a big change. Next slide, please. So I don't want to lose the audience, but I will have to talk a bit about the compliance. What are the areas of focus when you start hiring internationally? You want to be compliant. I hope maybe you've heard of the 5 Eyes. So the United States, the United Kingdom, New Zealand, Australia, and Canada. So these countries and regions, they have a multilateral agreement to share intelligence. So most of the candidates and people you're going to hire in the nuclear industry will certainly need to be security cleared, or you will want to perform a background check. And if they have a traceable history in one of those countries or region, then it can go faster and quicker. So if you have to open up first to these countries. And then some, I would say, visa implications. For most of the international hires, you will have to perform an LMIA, which is a labor market impact assessment. And it's also a long and painful process for your HR people that you're going to have to hand over this case to. And it will support the work permit process of your future hires. And when you hire contractors or even permanent employees, you have to make sure they are compliant with their taxes. They have to pay taxes in different countries. You don't want to leave that only to them. So any support you can get them with, immigration support, with putting them in touch with an immigration lawyer or a tax advisor who can advise them internationally, then please do so. I will certainly ask now Nicole to share a bit more about, including families and ongoing communication. You have to keep going with the international hires.
Everybody can hear me. Thank you, Clarice, for the quick introduction, and Naf for the quick introduction. Thanks for having me and listening to my perspective. When it comes to hiring internationally, it will be extremely important to include the family from the very start. And this really starts with the recruitment process. This does not start only once an offer has been accepted. It's really important to start that from the very beginning. So in hiring international, it is very important to make sure that your recruiting team is trained on how to handle international candidates, because there will be many, many questions throughout the recruitment process already. And this communication needs to be continued, obviously, throughout the recruiting process, through the offer process, through the acceptance, and then through onboarding. Family for most of us, unless of course we are single, is going to be a large part of what will make our decision either harder or easier in moving forward with a new opportunity. So it is extremely important to have family buy-in. And if the family is moving to a new assignment with the candidate, it is extremely important to consider this, meaning things like a standardized handbook, for example, are very, very helpful, where we can include information about housing options, about neighborhoods, about schooling, about hospitals, healthcare, local events, parks, things to do in general. These are all very, very important, especially in an international hiring environment, but then also, as Clarice mentioned, even within the same nation. When you are looking at large countries like Canada or the US, moving from one coast to the other is very much a cultural adjustment, and is very much a big change in regards to moving family, for example. So ongoing communication with your candidates as well as with those candidates' families are extremely important. From a personal standpoint, I have had the pleasure in meeting many wives of candidates and the other way around, meeting husbands of candidates as well. And it's important to include them from the beginning and make them feel welcome. So a handbook, I think, is a very good way to include them, to get information to the families, along with a structured way in how onboarding is handled for both the candidate as well as the dependents of that candidate. Over and out.
Before we flip on to the next part, you mentioned the inclusion of families. All four of you have relocated at some point in your careers, some, as Clarice mentioned, as recently as 2 years ago. How was your family experience in your relocations? Nigel.
Yeah, I just in anticipation of this session today, I talked to my wife Rebecca last night, and I said, "How would you describe our Canadian experience?" And she said, "It's the best thing we've ever done." And I was really pleased to hear that. I mean, it's not without challenges. We moved we have no children, but we have a cat. We brought our cat to Canada. You know, my wife left her role to join me. She found employment within Canada. But actually the rewards were huge in terms of enriching our life. It gave us a whole new thing to go after together. And I think it was a real bonding moment for our family, as well as being an intellectually challenging and rewarding job to do. It gives you a kind of shared purpose. So I think, and there's plenty of other foreign workers who work for CNL, and I think that's a reasonably shared experience. That it does coalesce your family.
That's great, Nigel. I'm glad the cat integrated well into Canada as well. We're a cat-friendly nation here. And Ben, based on your experience, you've gone to Korea and other countries that are there's a language barrier as well involved in familial and pet relocations. How did your team, the Overton team, handle that?
Well, unfortunately, we had to leave our boxer behind, so the dog didn't relocate. But originally back in 2014, my to work nationally, and I traveled with my 17-year-old son. So at that age, he was finishing up high school and transitioning into a Korean school system from California, where we relocated. Obviously, a huge change. We were afforded a handler, our relocation agent, work with us. He was able to help with the and get my son acclimated, and he actually enrolled in a Korean-speaking.
Amazing.
To one of the traditional international schools that has a U.S.-based curriculum or UK, and experience for him was eye-opening. It really integration into the culture, because there were things that he was able to show me that he was picking up from his school, his classmates. So that was great.
Incredible. So Ben made mention of a relocation agent and handler. Nicole, Clarice, is that kind of a standard practice that you think should be normal when it comes to international mobility? I see Nicole nodding, so.
Go ahead, Nicole, please.
I think so. I think it makes life easier for everybody involved to kind of have that go-to person, whether you call it a handler or a mentor or whatever you want to call it, that kind of guides you through that experience, that maybe has even went through that experience themselves, having done an international move, or maybe having had the chance to kind of integrate into that new country or into that new culture, wherever you are in the world. I think it's important to have that one-on-one interaction, both again with the candidate, but also with any dependents, to make it easier. Because I think what we tend to forget every now and then is that, yes, there's an opportunity, an exciting opportunity, but it comes with with a lot of human interaction that we need to consider, that are going to be a lot different from one country to another, from one continent to another. And it helps having an assigned person walking you through it, being there to answer questions. And the best process in the world, the best standards in the world, you can have all the handbooks in the world, are not going to take away from that human element. You need to be able to have a go-to person that you can ask questions to. And I think that will make life easier on everybody.
Appreciate that, Nicole. I think I may have jumped the gun a little bit. If Alicia, you want to go to the next slide? I think Clarice and Nicole are going to actually tackle a little bit more about cultural integration.
Yeah. So I would say very briefly some definitions, of course. So we took mostly when people relocate as internationals to a country. So depending on the time you're spending in the country, either you can talk about integration or assimilation. So integration is like when people adopt practices from another culture, another country, but without diminishing their own. When assimilation is really when they assume and they get into the values, the behaviors, the beliefs. So it's a huge change, which comes, I guess, over a certain amount of time. And yeah, I would say I experienced moving from France to the Netherlands and then from the Netherlands to Canada. I think I've brought a piece of every country with me. And if someday it's going to be heartbreaking because people are so nice here, but if I have to go back or to Europe or go someplace else, I will certainly bring along some Canadian stuff with me. Certainly not the poutine, I'm sorry, but a lot of different things I've learned, and certainly my resistance to the cold. Who is responsible for your new hires, international hires, to integrate? Answer is quite simple, but not that simple. It's everybody's responsibility. First, the family and the people who are going to move, they have to be in the right state of mind. I had someone last time who asked me if he could find his brand of mustard in Canada. And I was like, okay, if you're not ready to change your mustard, you're gonna suffer a lot because you're losing all your bearings. You have to start all over again. You don't know the medical system. You have to change your driving license. There are so many things that you don't even consider while moving. So you have to be adventurous. You have to be the Indiana Jones of relocation. And you have to embrace it. It's a chance. It's such a chance to move to another country and experience it for a certain period of time. If it can be time limited sometimes, and sometimes you want to stick around and live forever. What the teams could do is like it's the family and the people who are going to move responsibility, but it's also the team they are going to be working with. So the team manager, but also the team members. It's also responsibility for HR to make sure that they are integrating well, because again, a lot of effort, time, and investment in the move of these people. So if they have to leave 6 or 12 months later because they couldn't integrate well, it's a loss. So things which can be easy. It's like making sure the person is feeling comfortable. When you move, you don't have any connections anymore. You don't have any social connections. It took me a year to really get along with my neighbors. And a year is a long time when you know anyone else and you are with the time difference with your friends and family and colleagues. You can organize socials. It doesn't happen everywhere in all the companies, but having like a bowling party, a few drinks after work, and people can bond. It's very important. It's important to give people a sense of belonging, and they will belong first to the team they will integrate. The first connections you're making are the people at work when you move for work. I mean, I'm not sure if anyone wants to jump in to maybe comment about it.
I have a quick question, Clarice. You made mention of the social aspect of things. some people, I'm assuming no one on this call, are introverts. I just saw eyebrows raised that those people do exist. They're not the social type of people. They're not, but they, how do you manage personality types as well? Because like that sense of belonging could also be they just need to like take their time to integrate. How do you ensure that the team understands that part as well? Like also there's the cult, you actually have a bullet point here about conscious cultural unawareness. Some cultures, it's about you come into an organization, you're there to do a job. So how do you as a recruitment company, as Thomas Thor, handle that piece?
So we do a lot of preparation work.
Okay.
We talk for the people we are helping to relocate for months. So we really build up this relationship with them and make sure they also are prepared. And if they are not, sometimes we also let the company know that it won't work out. But we are moving a lot of introverts, and they are happy so far. So, yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Anyone else wants to jump in?
Nicole and Ben. Let's go Ben first, then Nicole.
I would say I had an interesting experience. I am one who would be considered more of a social at work, extremely extroverted, speech and get on stage and talk all the time. But if you take me out of that environment, me in the crowd, I'll be the one that sits there and just quickly. So I've had two recent relocation experiences, one to South Korea and then the second one to the United Arab Emirates. And when you look at those societies, Korea is pretty much homogenous, and that would be more of an assimilation, and where you assimilate to that culture. Whereas in the UAE, it was integration. There, about 80% are expats or international. So I would expect, that one would think the experience in the UAE would be more conducive to getting involved, meeting people, whereas my experience was the exact opposite. Since the assimilation culture is so, you tend to seek out and find the few others that are in your same boat, and it made it a little easier for me to make relationships and bond with people there because you were actually seeking them out.
Okay. And Nicole?
So I basically just wanted to touch back up on the point that Clarice raised in regards to we really from a manpower and from a staffing agency point of view, what is very important is building that relationship, and these hiring processes are not quick. So we are not talking about a 1 month process. In many of these cases, we're looking at 3 to 6 months easy, sometimes up to a year until somebody actually makes a move to move internationally or from one region to the other. So in that time, you do have a lot of time to get to know each other and kind of build a relationship. And what I mentioned with a lot of candidates that I handle, so to say, is look, at the end of this, we are going to be best friends because you will know a lot about me, I will know a lot about you, and we will work you through this. And I think this really applies for extroverts, same as introverts. Though obviously the conversations are going to be a lot different. When it comes to arriving at a new job site, I think with an introvert, as you had mentioned, they might just want to be left alone. They might want to find their own way. And that is okay. And our role here is just to support them as best as we can, to provide them with as much knowledge and as much preparation as possible, whereas for the extrovert, it will be easier because they will be able to kind of establish new relationships a lot quicker by themselves without necessarily a lot of support from our side. So I think it works for different personalities as long as we are able to support and answer questions to help them integrate and help them live their new life.
Thanks, Nicole. And Clarice?
Let's not forget that the nuclear industry, is extremely international. So a lot of people in the industry are ready to move from one country to another, and they understand why, and they have experienced it in the past. And they are motivated by the projects more than the location. And if I may, we don't hide anything from the beginning. Moving someone to Chalk River, we share a site, we share pictures of, the amount of snow they will face. We disclose everything so they can make an informed decision when they actually move. And certainly during those times when they can just pay a visit to the site and just say, okay, we can actually make a living and be in Deep River or in Pembroke, or, they have now to pick from a distance.
So Nigel, how did you feel about the snow here in Canada?
Well, I loved it. I kind of embraced it. I mean, for somebody who knew that they were going to be in Canada for a finite period of time and it wasn't going to be a forever move, I think there's a real responsibility on yourself to throw yourself into the culture, do all the all the things that you can't do at home. There's a huge difference to living in rural Canada to there is in urban UK. I mean, and so many kind of Canadian friends were able to give me access to things that I would never be able to do in the UK, ride a snowmobile, tap a maple tree, all those type of, kind of cliche things, but also just kind of really assimilate you into a different way of thinking, a different relationship really with the environment in many ways, Yeah, I mean, I coped with the snow. Guinness the cat wasn't so pleased, but he did okay too. So I think there is a responsibility on the individual people that people are hiring, that they do have to know that it is going to be different. But that different doesn't mean kind of worse or bad. And none of us have to shake off our entire identities of our other cultures as well. I think, I kind of found that I was able to, gravitate and be friends with other people who had also made similar moves, and we were able to, occasionally meet up and share a hobnob biscuit, which always got them to come to my office because you couldn't get them they had to be stuck in a suitcase and brought over to Canada. But so I think a great experience, and I think as long as you throw yourself into it with knowledge that it is going to be different, and you will have to cope with that, I think you can have a real adventure.
So Nigel made a good point. Ben, with your moves both to the UAE and Korea, were they finite moves? Was there a known end date? And did that help with the integration piece, knowing that there was a conclusion?
The original plan was a finite move date to Korea. I originally planned to stay there for maybe 2 years or so, and I ended up staying 5. So both situations basically were open-ended.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to prepare myself for a lack of certain comforts. And as Nigel mentioned, packing things in your suitcase, there were several times when I would fly home with empty suitcases and pack my normal, familiar toiletries and snacks and supplies and lists for friends of things that they wanted for home. So going into it with a finite mindset that ended up extending and extending and extending, I found myself every year immersing more into the culture, learning a little more of the language, because, okay, if I'm going to be here, I might as well integrate more. So For me, it was a little mixed as far as the finite versus open end because my situation evolved.
Mhm. Okay. And you mentioned that your son went with you to Korea. Did he also make the transition to UAE, or did he end up saying,
Oh no,
sorry, Dad, I'm done?
he finished school and went back to the States and back to California where we were before.
Amazing.
Well, the UAE trip was solo and I just traveled a lot.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting because my friend who lives in Paris always asks me if I'm going to visit her, to bring her Excel spearmint gum for some reason. Can't get Excel gum in France. So I completely understand the random things you have to pack for friends and family. I can hear Nicole giggling because it's probably the same when you have to go home to see family in Germany, and the same for Clarice, and I'm assuming Nigel also doesn't miss poutine at all. So on a scale of 0 to 10, this is just going to be a simple, quick round the table thing. How integrated did you feel when you did make the final relocation? Start with Nicole.
So for me, I'm more on the adventurous side. So I made a lot of the moves myself. My first move was when I was 22 from Germany to the US, which brought quite a few surprises. Because I had visited the US before, and I was very surprised by the amount of cultural integration I actually living and working here. That was completely unexpected. Because when you visit a country versus actually integrating, living and working in that country, it's a very different approach. So I ran into a few. That was obviously a personal relocation, so I did not have any help. This was all on me. When I made the move to the UAE, again, it played right into my being very adventurous, and I was extremely excited to make that move. It was to integrate into the UAE, going over there with an open mindset. I think that is very important for anybody who is making a move, no matter if it's within your own country. And if you are looking at the US as an example, and you're looking at the Southeast, Florida, for example, and moving to California, it's a very different mindset between those two areas of the US. So you will have to integrate. You will have to have open conversations with differing opinions on a lot of different things. And so I found myself just doing that and just going into these situations very open-minded, trying to learn other cultures, other points of views, and considering that. And I took that with me everywhere I went. So the move from Germany to the US to the UAE, and then the UAE back to the US, I just kind of took like a little piece of my European culture to the US, my US culture that I have accumulated to the UAE, and the UAE culture that I learned while there for 7 years back here with us. So we kind of have a little bit of everything with us here now, and I'm glad for it. I'm glad for it. I'm very happy that we have made these moves.
Amazing. Ben, I saw you nodding when Nicole was talking about the move from California to Florida and equating it to two different countries. I feel like you've had that experience moving just from California to Florida. So what was that integration like?
Oh, I've been consulting for a while, much since 2006, with a couple of exceptions where I took some in-house positions. I've relocated all across the country, and as Nicole said, it's like traveling to a different country sometimes, based on politics, just regional differences, the population breakdown everywhere you go in the States, and something different you have to deal with. And because states have different laws and rules, especially now. I mean, now making the way each state is handling things differently. It's a new experience, and you might come across some laws or rules that you don't even just by crossing the border into the.
It's almost like the United States. Each state is its own nation.
Yes, and indeed.
Nigel, how about you? On a scale of 0 to 10, how integrated did you feel with your relocations?
I'm going to kind of say a kind of 8. I think it kind of plays out on kind of multiple levels. On a cultural kind of level, I felt very kind of integrated. I felt very welcomed in my role and my job. I think I maybe never got quite used to the -30s, but I was getting acclimatized near the end. I think some of the areas that are much harder are understanding things like the taxation system, healthcare, work permits, etc. And I think that's where the hiring agent or the employer can really kind of play a real key part, because those are quite impenetrably difficult for people who come from different jurisdictions.
Okay. And finally, Clarice, 0 to 10, how integrated did you feel?
So today, considering the fact I'm still working with an international team, I would be a 6 out of 10. When my husband is clearly working with a Canadian company surrounded by Canadians, so he became an 8. And my little girl, who is 4, going to school, she speaks English perfectly, so she's bilingual, and she corrects my English, which is annoying. Then she's clearly an 11. Yeah, I think I'm raising a little Canadian.
That's incredible. That's just, she's an 11. Based on that, I think, Alicia, can we get the next slide, please? It sounds like because the families also end up working internationally as well, and now that Ben touched on it, with COVID, everything's a little different. So how do you handle this hiring internationally versus working remotely piece? Clarice?
In March, it could have been scary to talk about international relocations, and it was. Between March and May, I felt that Canadian organizations were not ready yet to consider international hiring. And a lot of companies, I would say, which had quite a traditional recruitment process with face-to-face meetings and on-site visits, shifted to something a bit more virtual, and were able to hire people from a distance. So you clearly see, like, you can just imagine the rest of the body of the person you have. You don't know how tall they are, or it's a strange feeling. And I'm not sure I would quite be ready to hire someone from a distance. I think I will come to it, but I still have the possibility now to meet people I will hire in my team. So I'm taking advantage of it. So I never rushed anyone into making any virtual decisions, let's say, because I completely empathize on the fact that, yeah, it's always important to meet people.
So, Nigel, for example, you're technically both a remote worker and an international worker.
Yes, I am. I've spent 3 years now kind of working in a range of roles for CNL, and 2 years was spent on site, and I've spent the last year working pretty much, well, certainly since March, entirely in the UK. I mean, it comes with its challenges. I think we all kind of recognise that none of us would have expected remote work to work quite so well as it probably has done in this year. I now run quite a large team of people at CNL. It's a new role in the last few months. I've met face to face probably a quarter of those people. I've actually hired people remotely now. I have working remotely for me, and those are people I'm probably never going to meet. So I think, that's a huge change for all of us, and in this year, and I think it also kind of proves that, should we want to get access to international skills without actually relocating people, that is an option for us, when I suspect my organization and other organizations would never have considered that option before 2020.
So Clarice and Nicole, with that kind of potential as having an international hire working remotely, going back to like the original part of this presentation was on like tax codes and like the visas and all that. You remove the visa concept, you still have to do some taxation issues, but does it make it easier? Clarice? Clarice's team, Nicole, went like this, so.
I had the case with people who were willing to relocate but couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Someone based in the UK and another person based in Argentina, and they have been I'll say they are working remotely today with Canadian organizations with the plan of relocating when they can. Okay. So I would say as a temporary option, that's clearly a good option. I would have, I would say time will tell if that's the experience can be expanded and like having people actually never relocating. But I would raise some concern about, the team cohesion. It's so easy sometimes to say things face to face, things you wouldn't dare saying on a virtual meeting. Yeah, it's very difficult to say how it's going to turn.
Thanks. Ben, I saw you nod when Clarice mentioned virtual versus in-person conversations.
Yes, so with the nuclear industry, there's, in the training world where I reside, there's obviously the opportunity for a classroom training environment to be conducted remote. Actually, over in the UAE, when the pandemic started to spread and the isolations and the lockdowns began, we were able to transition pretty quickly into a remote teaching environment for classroom training. Now, there's always maintenance and operations where you have simulator for ops, you have maintenance, you got to touch the pumps, you got to touch the valves. Those things obviously a little more challenging to do remotely, but definitely from a classroom perspective, I did see a very quick turnaround in adoption of that.
So with students especially, there's a bit of supervision and management. Did you find that a little easier to handle, or was there some what was the challenge in doing that piece virtually?
The challenge initially was the records keeping documentation piece of it. Attendance records, we had to change the processes for how you maintained attendance, how you could get a log record of students checking in and making sure that they participated. So I found that was probably the most challenging piece, the record keeping aspect of it.
Okay. And Clarice, do you how would you suggest, was both you and Nicole actually recruit internationally, is you do have to do a lot of these I don't know how tall you are questions kind of thing, because right now, based on the Christmas tree behind you, it could be 7 feet tall and you're 6'4" seated, so I'm unaware. How did you guys manage this on a recruitment side of things, like ensuring that you've got the right candidates and invading people's homes, basically? Nicole?
I think a lot of it is just ongoing, really, because it's very, very difficult to find a good fit for a team with one conversation. So I think it's very important to have ongoing communication and multiple interviews set up throughout the process to make sure you have a good fit. Whether you're 6'4" or 5'2" doesn't really matter on that. However, I think the personalities still need to match up, regardless on if you work face to face together or if you work remotely together. The personality fit for the team still needs to be there regardless. It brings a couple more challenges in regards to communication because you don't have, the coffee cup conversations at the coffee machine opportunities. But we do have the technology to be able to have calls like this via the internet, via applications like Skype and Zoom, and where you can see face to face. Yes, you don't have the in-person interaction, but this is as good as it gets in many regions of the world and for many companies. So multiple conversations on multiple levels, I think make a big difference to be able to really determine, is this person going to be a good fit on the personal side for the team? Because all the qualifications in the world are not going to help if you cannot in a certain team environment. So that is important.
I agree with Nicole, like ongoing communication. The trap for most of us would be that once the person has signed the offer, you just leave the person alone and say, okay, this person is going to join in X amount of month. We are here obviously to bridge and to make the communication ongoing, because it's a trap to say that the person signed the offer but can still pull out if something is going wrong or if they overthink. And today, that context, people who can relocate in 2021, we don't know when in 2021, yeah, you are overthinking. You're just, waiting the choice like too many times, I think. So also encouraging people to talk to all members of your team, junior members, senior members, people with managerial responsibilities or not. So they can also have this chit chat type of conversations. It doesn't have to be technical interview every time. It has to be encouraged. That's an effort. That's more difficult. Yeah.
And Nigel, you mentioned that you've hired remotely and you've got a team. How are you handling this communications piece, especially with the time differences?
Well, I mean, most of my kind of remote team are kind of working in Canada, so the kind of the time difference kind of it kind of affects me, and to be honest, it's not quite as bad as you might think. It's just you just reconfigure your day. But the communication piece, I think, is a huge challenge. I mean, working in a virtual world, I think it's no different whilst I'm 4,500 miles away than it is for somebody who's 40 kilometers away from the site at the moment. I think that the technology just removes that distance, but it doesn't remove the remoteness. And I think communication, I think, is an absolute imperative. And I recall somebody who was one of my kind of senior colleagues when I was kind of young. He used to say to me, sort of, if you think you've communicated enough, you're wrong by a factor of 10. And I think, it's not a great saying, but you do get the kind of point. Every time you think, oh, I've done my piece, you think, no, do more. And I think particularly, I think at the moment, whilst we're in uncertain times, there's a lot of uncertainty in people's environments, not just in the workplace, that keeping talking and keeping kind of people on message and, keeping everybody kind of aligned and is absolutely kind of vital, be they 4,000 miles away or 40 kilometers.
Great, thank you. So I think this is our last slide, but I do have one final question that I'd like to ask everybody, and I'm going to actually start with Ben on this one. What is your final piece of advice to everyone on the line, and in regards to if they're thinking about pursuing an overseas opportunity?
I would say do your research. Obviously, the internet has brought us a wealth of knowledge at our fingertips. And if you are going to be in a location that you're completely unfamiliar with, make some contacts, find some people who visited the area or someone who lives there. Do research online, figure out what types of stores and shops are available or aren't available. Processing, like getting a license or getting utilities switched on at an apartment or house that you'll buy or rent. Those little things, if you don't understand the processes before, can be amazingly difficult. I had an experience, when I had a vehicle accident. Actually, a tire blew out on me in a vehicle in the UAE, and the amount of processes and agencies and directorates that I had to go to in a specific order with specific paperwork ended up taking me weeks to resolve. It would have been a one-day experience. So just learn the processes and the cultural differences.
So learn processes, and as Clarice's original client mentioned, find out where to find your own mustard kind of thing, right?
There you go. Or bring it with you.
Bring your own mustard.
Bring your
Definitely
own
bring your own mustard. Nicole, what advice would you give to people on the line today? Nicole? Okay. Clarice?
We lost Nicole. So I would say, first of all, call Thomas Thor. Then, the second piece of advice would be, it's very easy, and it's too easy to be judgmental. So you have your own set of beliefs. You've been raised a certain way. I've been raised believing that the French food and the French wine are the best. Yeah, okay. So you see, exactly. And so just when coming back to the slide, we missed a few items there, but it's like,
So
if you don't know how it's going to be,
definitely say yes. Can you hear me? I'm here.
There is a delay. Sorry, Nicole, I was talking actually. Can you hear us?
Keep going, Clarice, about good food and wine.
Okay, just saying that, keep an open mind. If you don't know where you're going into, what's the culture, just try to learn as much as you can about it, and talk to people if you can. It's like, websites are great today. We have the internet; it's magic. But if you have the chance to talk to the people who are going to hire you, how is it like to live in Chalk River, and how did you integrate? And asking all the questions to people who already made a move, it makes things easier.
Okay. Let's try Nicole again. Final thoughts?
No problem at all.
There is definitely a delay.
Definitely a delay. So, though Nicole will probably interrupt with a 5 minutes after moment, Nigel, what are your final thoughts?
Well, I kind of think the things that we truly all kind of fear, like, loneliness, will I get on with people, all that type of thing, will I feel isolated? They are just not going to happen. I think there's so many things that unite human beings around the globe, but expect all the processes to be different. Expect, you won't understand where you get your SIN number from. You won't understand how you get an Ontario health card. You won't understand. So there's a lot of practical stuff. And I think you're right. The internet is there to kind of help, as are the experiences of, those of us working in larger organizations. There's nearly always been somebody in exactly the same position to you prior to your arrival. So kind of just lean on the human beings, because they're pretty much the same all around the world. But do expect the processes to be different.
Okay. And we're going to try Nicole again. Final thoughts. Final thought on my end is internet is a good thing, except when it doesn't work. So I want to thank all of you for being on the line today. I learned a lot. I made copious notes, and don't tell anyone. Clarice, Nicole, I might be in touch if I ever want to do a relocation. It's our secret. But thank you, everybody, for everything that the information that you provided us today. I will be in touch, Clarice, to debate French wine with you, absolutely. And thank you, everybody, for your time. Have an amazing day. And to everybody on the line, thank you so much for joining us again for our D&I series.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate it now.
Bye.